In the Hearts and Minds, Book 0, The Birth of a Hero. Story 3. When you wake up in the morning with your head up in a cryochamber. A man sat in a mail cart filled to the brim with green water. When he became aware of his own existence, he first strained to remember who he was. His eyes pulsed. His temples pulsed. Even the skin on his forehead was affected by this incessant headache, trying to knock open his skull from the inside. The young man grappled with his arms as he adjusted his spot. He was floating, or sitting. He was leaning, or tied down. The only thing he could be certain of was the wetness slicking his skin, making his hands too rubbery to grab hold of his surroundings. A heavy, cloth-like material surrounded him, but his hands wouldn't work right to investigate further. Eventually, his aching eyes cracked open. The man regretted the action immediately, for layers upon layers of dried crust worked at his lids, making each blink excruciating and vile. But what he saw almost made him forget to be disgusted. A new sensation quickly took its place, seeping into each of his wet limbs, electrifying even the tips of his fingers. Fear. Horror. He sat in a mail cart, the kind that trundled, the kind with tires that never drove straight. The young man was not so horrified by the setting. What perturbed him was his state of nakedness in this dark basement room. Flickering fluorescent bulbs buzzed somewhere, but the only light illuminating his bare form came from below. He was submerged in water, his wrists tied to either end of the cart, but the water was not so clear. He couldn't even see his lower limbs as he floated about gently. Jets applied pressure, a constant rotation of liquid. It was the jets where the lights seeped in from the murky dark. It gave him barely a glimpse, but it was just enough to tell. He was naked, alone, in the dark, tied down, and submerged in cloudy water. It didn't matter that he had forgotten who he was. The man began to panic. Whoever he was, he knew he did not want to be in this basement. But the ties binding his wrists were awkwardly spaced. He could neither pull his full weight beneath each arm, nor reach the firm ties with his teeth. The jets were too strong. They kept his body suspended as it glubbed more and more of that foul liquid up his shoulders, his chest. A minute beeping amped up his panic as he thrashed his feet, kicking them out of the water. His bare toes were illuminated by the green glow from the jets. A fine sprinkling of some gritty substance wiled between them. Was there sand at the bottom? The beeping gave way to a low hum, but it sounded very near to a growl. His startled sob pierced the quiet, and the humming stopped, abrupt. The beeping did, too, in a flash. Gooseflesh prickled violent shivers over his skin. He hardly dared to breathe, squinting into the vast gloom. Tables typical for a workroom basement stood, silent sentinels. Vibrant light haloed around a bend, the only striking spot of illumination as far as he could see. What was over there? Who? Beeping slowly returned, and the jets channeled faster. He felt their direction change, targeting his lower torso and not his feet. The jets shot near his ass and lower lumbar. It could have been soothing. The man had heard of luxuries such as this. It could have been soothing. More sand spread over him. Every brush against the side of the cart was disgusting as the grains rubbed into his skin. His panicked His panicked attempts at freedom had yet to bear fruit, but his legs couldn't help but keep rabbiting up the slippery slope. He was a runner, he remembered. His legs were trustworthy. If escape was possible, his legs would find it. A weird smell began to filter in. At first, the cloying humidity of hot water had rimmed his nose with the damp moisture, but ever since the jets moved, a new scent rose into his nostrils. Sweet. Sugary sweet. The smell was hard to take. It destroyed his desire to flee, and instead awoke a desire to hide. It smelled like it was coming from him, the water. The man looked down into the murky depths. Gritting his shivering jaw, he bent one leg out, folding the flexible limb until he could spot the grains of sand sitting on his toes. Craning his neck so far he felt it lock up, he sniffed at the substance. Reeling his head back and whimpering through the pain of unlocking his joints, he recognized it immediately. He had worked in a cheesecake factory, had he not? The smell was sugar. He was sitting in a vat of tea, being steeped into a soggy, wrinkled prune. The man floated for a while, stunned. His rabbit legs stopped pumping. His thoughts stopped trying to remember who he was. It didn't matter. He was a runner. He had worked in a cheesecake factory. He was a man. That was enough, wasn't it? All he could think was that he had been kidnapped by a psychopath who had an ungodly fetish. The man lay there, suspended in time, in life, in tea. He didn't know how long. Eventually, the jets changed again, spinning the water in different directions, effectively spreading the sugar around and stirring it until it dissolved. Was someone coming to eat him? Or serve him up at a party? A refreshment for a whole contingent of psychopaths? The man figured he had also been a soldier. How else could he remain calm once the reality of his death washed over him? Once he realized the futility of struggling. He gazed up at the ceiling. Pipes and boards created a network, usually covered by another layer of drywall. But this was the underbelly, the network, the beating lifeblood of the torture chamber. A strange sensation began to prickle in his toes. He ignored it at first, thinking he had begun to lose feeling. Instead, pain shivered even the hair on his legs. It prickled in awareness, budding up, up, up. The man had thought nothing was in the tea with him. Could he have been wrong? The prickly sensation reached his navel, swooping his stomach in a dangerous yet alluring feeling. It made his breath hitch, and he ticked off another piece of who he was. A virgin, undoubtedly. But when the spiky, wandering beast reached past the waterline and began to crawl up his chest, he realized it was a succulent. A hard-backed succulent, trellised in a straight line. A soft green tip came up to stare him straight in the face, though the man didn't know where to look. The triangular thing didn't have eyes. It paused, and the man felt the action was done with purpose. He felt something behind that fuzzy exterior, something sentient. Carefully, the man prodded his foot out of the water. Choking on a scream and ending in a heavy swallow, he saw where the plant had sprouted from. In between his toes. The vine had grown from inside of him. Was he a plant? Has he always been a plant? He was just Iago Denfar, humbly invisible. Wait. He was Iago. Iago. As clarity splashed in his mind, his lungs still struggled to breathe. He had been human. He had been only human. Before. In a voice thick With fear and disuse, he asked the plant, "Can we escape?" The little green head moved, as if tilting its leafy head to the side in thought. Then it began to climb.